Oh my God. All right, video 3. Let's wrap it up. I can't believe this is only module 1. I have to do 7 of these. Okay. So this one is sort of a quirky video specifically about how you use your energy, because I think for a lot of us, we just have such a fundamental misunderstanding of energy flows that a lot of our stress about interpersonal communication comes from our mismanagement of our psychic and physical energy. And some of this is I'm a yoga teacher, and some of this is just I think it's true, and some of it is that for years and years and years I identified as highly extroverted, very social. I mean, people, when I took those personality quizzes and answered the questions, I scored off the charts extroversion, and people always, would say things to me like, well, you're extroverted, so you understand. But then the more I started to think about it, and the more I started to really get in tune with the kind of what I want and how I want to spend my time, the more I started to realize that I'm actually not extroverted. I'm just social, and I'm capable in right? I'm social for certain purposes. So when we think about this issue of self-efficacy, my high self-efficacy, when I'm being self-efficacious, when I'm solving problems and giving advice and organizing, I have a lot of extroverted energy to do that among people. But when I'm not doing those things, then I'm just expected to kind of participate and follow and engage and be around people. I'm very introverted. And so I started to think I just don't know that introvert extrovert is a useful way to think about energy flows anymore, even though I do think it's super important to think about energy flows. So what I did is I sort of settled on two very basic models. One, it's called the Big 5 personality traits, which includes self-monitoring. And then the STAR model of introversion. And I wanted to talk about these because, again, these labels, are you an introvert? Are you an extrovert? Are you high in neuroticism? They're made up. You can choose to label yourself however you want. That means if you like the idea of being a person who is high on conscientiousness, start thinking the kinds of thoughts that a person high on conscientiousness would think, and then do the types of things that a person high on conscientiousness would do. It's your choice. No one is born conscientious or not. It's just, certainly do we have, is there some nebulous part of our biology that maybe lends itself to that direction? Yeah, fine, you can have that. But at the end of the day, when it comes to your personality characteristics and how you show up in the world, those are all your choices. And that doesn't mean you don't have seriously embedded, ingrained habits of behavior now. So if your habits of behavior now are that you're incredibly sloppy and messy and you're late for everything and you're disorganized and nothing's where it needs to be and you're always running behind and you would rather procrastinate than get your stuff done, yeah, overnight, you're not going to think some conscientious thoughts and then suddenly become a conscientious person. But that doesn't mean you're stuck with what you've got. It's just a question of whether you want to do the work to get someplace else. So that's why I teach them to you, because to me, they're not ways of labeling yourself in the sense of they're impermanent and they're already fixed to your identity. There are ways you could label yourself if they are a better fit for you. And also, you don't have to be conscientious all the time, right? It can be domain specific, because maybe you don't care about being conscientiousness in how clean your home is, but you really want your online courses to be highly conscientious, right? So again, you can always choose. So to me, this is never about psychology. It's not about labeling your personality, whatever the hell that is. It's about, do you on a regular basis think conscientious thoughts? Do you want to be conscientious in this aspect of your life? Is conscientiousness a trait you value in this particular relationship? If so, great, use more of it. And if it's not, then don't worry about the fact you're not conscientious. So let's talk first about the Big 5 personality traits, because I think these are labels that you can think about as ways to imagine what your ideal self looks like and what your actual self looks like, and how do you want to start closing that gap. Okay, so the first one is conscientiousness. At a basic level, this is just organization. This is how carefully you attend to the details of things, crossing the T's, dotting the I's. Conscientiousness is a weird one for me, because in some ways I'm highly conscientious, and in some ways I'm super sloppy, and that's because I spend so much time being really conscientious in some areas that the rest of my life I kind of let go. So again, I think it's a question. If you want to be generally conscientious, then give the same amount of time to every single activity, right? X number of minutes on the dishes, X number of minutes editing my homework, X number of minutes organizing my calendar, X number of minutes putting my clothes away. Or you can be super conscientious in some areas that are important to you, like my teaching self-concept. I want to be highly conscientious, But my office, to the degree that I want students to be comfortable in here and I don't want it to have like rotting food, fine. But like I don't care if there's books everywhere. Like it just doesn't matter. All right, that's conscientiousness. If you're highly conscientious, that means you're highly organized, highly detail oriented. And if you're low on conscientiousness, that's the opposite. Neuroticism. So being neurotic in this particular model equates to emotional instability. And essentially that means that it doesn't mean that you're overly emotional. I don't like that word. Everyone is emotional. Everyone is overly emotional. You're just the right amount of overly emotional for what you think you're supposed to be doing. But everyone is overly emotional, okay? This is a matter of whether you can be purposeful and intentional with your emotions to achieve certain outcomes, whether you can kind of funnel your emotions into productive directions, or whether you are sort of the victim of your own emotional instincts, whether or not those are positive or good. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's emotional stability, but it's certainly like if you're high neurotic, you probably have a harder time channeling your emotions and being conscientious with your emotions. You tend to be kind of like a slave to your passion, so to speak. And if you're low on emotion and neuroticism, that means you're a little bit more to kind of get the lay of the land and decide, how do I want my emotional reactions to work right now? Almost all of us are high on neuroticism. There's probably like a little bit of differentiation for most people, but the only people I know who are very low on neuroticism are either like on this autism spectrum, which is another reason that neuroticism is kind of funky because it's so culturally bound, right? And two, they're people who have practiced emotional management very, very hard. It's not just something they're born to do. All right, conscientiousness, neuroticism. The third is agreeableness. This is how trustworthy and friendly you are, basically, right? Do you go out? So Albert Einstein once said that the most important decision that a person has to make in the morning is whether the world is with you or against you. And I think that that is very true because you'll never know, frankly. There's no fact book that tells you factually whether the world and the people in it are with you or against you. Bad shit happens all the time to good people, and good shit happens all the time to bad people, and good shit happens to good people, and bad stuff happens to bad people, right? It's if you make up some kind of like, well, this bad thing happened because this other bad thing happened, that's punctuation. That is you making up something to make sense of random chaos, but it is all just random chaos. So openness is the degree, agreeableness is the degree to which you believe people are out with you. And low agreeableness is the degree to which you believe people are out to get you. And obviously, too much agreeableness can be problematic if you're kind of just like naively trusting, but don't look at the extremes, right? There's just, do you want to more be like, the world is on my side, I will go out kind of with a cautious trust? Or do you want to be like, man, generally speaking, people are evil and cruel, and I'm going to walk around kind of suspect of everyone? Now, don't look at the extremes, because if you look at the extremes, yes, of course, extreme agreeableness would be stupid, all right? But that's not what we're talking about. So don't say like, well, I don't want to be a sucker, because nobody's asking you to be a sucker. They're asking if you want to kind of extend the benefit of the doubt to people, right? The generous read, if it were. All right. So conscientiousness, neuroticism, agreeableness. Then we've got openness. Openness is basically your progressiveness versus your conservatism. And I don't mean that in a political sense, except I do. I just mean like, are you willing to tear down the system and try something new, right? Are you willing to get rid of tradition in pursuit of progress? Are you willing to go into the unknown territory and try things out? Or is it better that we just do what's already familiar and safe and stay there because what's that one? Better the devil you know, kind of thing. I'm very open in the sense I like to try shit. Like if stuff's not working, fuck it. Let's just try something new. If it doesn't work, like, you know, who cares? At least we learned stuff, right? I'm all about like making a lot of mistakes, and life is just one long series of mistakes, and you learn from mistakes and you make better mistakes and then you die. For a lot of people that would be very stressful. It's a high uncertainty level. It's a lot of risk. It requires a lot of tolerance for discomfort, and it requires you to kind of let go your illusion of security. And I understand that that's not the way everybody wants to function, and frankly, that's good because people like me would make it very hard, like for us, for example, to have a SUNY system, because I would just constantly be like, these rules are stupid, I hate them, let's do other stuff. So again, we'll talk later about this thing called relational dialectics, which is the fact that most of your life is not choosing. It's not like, oh, I'm either progressive or I'm conservative. It's domain specific because you're going to have different degrees of that stuff depending on the different things that are at stake. And also, most of your life is a tension between these two things, because no human being can run around without a certain degree of conservatism, because you have to like put on pants every day and you have to know what to eat, and you're eventually going to eat the same food all the time. You're going to watch the same TV shows. Your life cannot just be one big unpredictable adventure, right? Likewise, you can't be my grandma who worked her whole life until she was like 95 and she was a bitch. I do not like either one of my grandmothers. But, at least she like kicked some ass until she was old, and then she just sat in her chair and watched Fox News and fed her cats for 5 years, got Alzheimer's, then got dementia, and now just drools on herself in a nursing home, which costs $100,000 a year, and she's probably going to live 5 more years. A total vegetable, right? Because she let her conservatism kicked in. And I don't mean that in the Fox News conservatism sense. That's just what she liked to watch. I mean in the sense she stopped challenging herself to be open and try new ideas, right? The biggest predictor of Alzheimer's is, other than family history and lifestyle, is the degree to which you engage in new ideas on a regular basis. All right. And then last but not least, we have this introversion thing, which is kind of what I want to focus on for a bit. Introversion is your energy flow. You used to believe that introversion meant you had inward-facing energy, meaning that you got energy from spending time by yourself in sort of like introspective reflection, and that you lost energy having to kind of direct your attention to multiple different things at different times. So if you, so this is why, for example, somebody who goes out and gives a stand-up comedy routine to thousands of people could be introverted, because while they're on stage, their energy only has to go one place, and that's to them, right? Like right now, this is fine. This isn't draining me of energy at all because it's really me alone with my thoughts. I'm just doing it for a group. So the same difference here is when I get up in front of a class. Now, if I have to hold a conversation with people, especially multiple people in a row, that really drains me. So, but here's the thing I've come to believe over the years, and this is not like going to be a test question. For you, you really just need to know the differences between introversion and extroversion. But I don't believe there are I don't believe there are extroverts. Here's why. I think people have a very limited capacity for spending time with other people. I think they have a limited capacity for multitasking. I think everyone does better when they have a quality over quantity approach to life, where they do a few things well and they take lots of breaks and they have lots of time to reflect. I do not believe that anyone functions well jumping around from project to project and constantly being on the move and constantly being busy and constantly being distracted. I think people do that shit and call themselves extroverts because they don't like spending time alone. You have to be a person who likes to spend time alone. The best person that you are going to spend time with, like your best person of company, needs to be yourself. Like that is just, you are born alone, you die alone, and you need to learn to get real cozy to being alone. And you know why? Because if you're afraid to be alone, you will make decisions to keep people who are bad in your life. They're not bad. It's a bad dynamic. When you're okay being alone, if people want to leave, then they leave and you'll be okay. And that is the greatest sort of like self-certainty that you can give yourself, is like, you'll just be okay. And so when you tell yourself you're an extrovert, I get energy from this and I get energy from people and I like to do this and I like to have a lot going on, I like to be really busy project. You're just giving yourself a bunch of excuses to avoid yourself. At the same time, you can't spend all your time alone, because if you're spending all your time alone, then you're sort of avoiding being challenged by the outside world. So there is a degree as like too much introversion. But I think all of us, again, I think it's a tension between introversion and extroversion. And I think we all sort of fall in different dynamics on that. But I don't know that there is such thing as like an extrovert. I think there are just like different types of different types of ways that you use your energy. And this is why I'm going to send you one of your assignments for this module is to read quickly. It's very short. This new model of introversion that's emerging called the STAR model of introversion, and it stands for the 4 types of introverts, right? So there's the social introvert, who is a person who just prefers to like focus on a small group of people at once and just kind of like really invest in some small relationships instead of having lots and lots, like being the social network hub. And I'm definitely a social introvert. There's also a thinking introvert, and this is a person who likes to spend a lot of time in introspection, likes to spend a lot of time by themselves, or kind of daydreamers. I'm definitely also a thinking introvert. There are anxious introverts, and this is kind of the type of people who avoid a lot of demands on their time and energy because they just sort of are fear-based. And that one I think is just kind of a catch-all because I mean there certainly are people like that, and that's also not to say you don't pick one. You like have different degrees. So when you take the test, it'll kind of show like what percentage of you is S, what percentage is T. So and there are a fair amount of people that have a high A introversion. I'm high on S, high on T, low on A, and then there's also the restrained or reserved introvert, and that is people who kind of like to operate at a slightly slower pace. They prefer to think before they speak or act. They also might take a while to get going. Now, this is interesting because I think everyone is more reserved or restrained than they think they are. I think we all think we can like go fast, but I think that's a cultural like go, 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 go kind of thing that we've been conditioned. More and more, go, go, faster, faster. But when I really think about it, like I don't feel good functioning that way. Maybe for very short bursts of time. And the way that introversion was described in this book I really like is the way you drive on the highway. So if you like city driving where you go a slower pace and you stop a lot and you look around and you get to see the sights and it kind of takes a lot more gas because you're stopping and starting a lot, that's extroversion. If you like to just go on the highway at a steady pace, just no stops, no starts, no breaks, just go, 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 your attention is focused on one task for a sustained amount of time, then you're an introvert. But if you think about your life, you actually probably have a preference for both. It's just very context dependent, very dependent on how you're feeling, very dependent on how you've eaten, very dependent on your social, physical cues, very dependent on the kinds of people you're spending time with, where you are in your life, your domains, right? What else you have going on, the demands on your time. And so I don't think labeling yourself as an introvert or extrovert is helpful, but I think it's helpful to think about all the different ways in which your energy gets used up and all of the different ways in which you replenish your energy. Because if you are a person who finds yourself at the end of the day like having not actualized on the things that are most valuable to you and finding that your time gets sucked away with a lot of stuff you didn't want to be doing, I don't care if that's taking every person that you know out for coffee or if that's sitting in front of your video games by yourself for 6 hours. You are not putting your energy in the places that you want it to go. So you have to think about how do you be more productive with your energy, and thinking about the different models of the STAR model can be helpful, because if you tend to be a thinking introvert, you need to make more time to think. And frankly, like sitting around playing 6 hours of anything, I don't care if it's me doing this or me grading papers or me teaching, that's not thinking. That's just buffering. That's just me like finding some shit to keep myself busy, but I'm not engaged with myself. I'm just distracted. So it doesn't matter if you're spending time alone or with other people. The question is, are you getting to know yourself more, which is introversion? Or are you getting to know other people more, which is extroversion? And you need a fair balance of both, because a lot of times we're directing our energy outward at other things, whether it's other people or video games or shopping or whatever, and we're not directing energy inwards to get to know ourselves and to figure out who we are and what we want. And that to me is why I like to think of myself as an introvert, because that is the self-concept, right? I am an introvert as a self-concept. I accept that self-concept because whether or not people think I am, and this is that whole perceived value social identity, right? People who treat me like an extrovert and are like, oh no, there's no way you're introverted, you're a social butterfly. I don't like those people. I'm like, nope, I don't care what you think. I don't care what your like facts are. I don't care what information you've gathered. I get to decide how to define myself, and I have defined myself as an introversion who is high on social and thinking introversion, low on anxious and restrained introversion, right? That's just how I think of myself. And that's helpful to me because I want to be the kind of person who spends time getting to know myself and who's directing my energy inward. Because if I'm not doing that stuff, I lose sight of who am I versus who is everyone else. What do they need versus what do I need? And pretty soon I'm just all of everyone else. I'm what they need. I'm what they want. I'm what you want me to be, right? And that stresses me out. So introversion is an opportunity to create kind of a, not a barrier, but maybe like a temporary fence for you to just figure out like who are you and what do you want and what don't you want and who doesn't fit and who does fit and what do you want to do right now. And when you don't know that stuff about yourself, you can't fundamentally have good relationships because you don't have a good relationship with you, right? So how are you going to have a good relationship with everyone else? So last thing is self-monitoring. I love self-monitoring. So self-monitoring is the self-talk practice of paying attention to what's going on with you in relationship to the social cues around you. So when we talk with competence about high appropriateness always goes with high self-monitoring. The thing I love about self-monitoring is that it's kind of a double-edged sword. So high self-monitors tend to be people who spend a lot of time thinking about their self-presentation, thinking about meeting the norms of the situation, thinking about what other people expect from them, thinking about this, thinking about that, thinking about how they perceive you, thinking about whether or not you're making the right impression, right? You spend a lot of time thinking about how your external self is circulating around in the world. High self-monitors have much more successful professional relationships than interpersonal relationships, which makes sense because your relationships on a professional level tend to be all about like appearance and fitting the norms and making everyone comfortable. So if you're a high self-monitor, you tend to have really good professional relationships because you're really good at being what people want you to be. But it's hard for you to have satisfying interpersonal relationships because you don't know who you are. Because you're so busy worried about how you fit in with everything that you don't know how to show up as who you are for other people. So you'll show up in your interpersonal relationships, like romantic relationships, the same way. What do you want me to be? What do you need? Do I meet the situation? Are you mad at me? Are you looking at me? What do you think of me, right? You spend all your time with that. But that means you're always trying to be what will make the situation the most functional. You're not showing up as what you want to be, and you're not getting to know yourself as an effect of the relationship. Low self-monitors. So these are people who, and again, it's a range, and there's also tensions because obviously in certain contexts you're going to need higher self-monitoring skills than in other contexts. But people who tend toward the lower self-monitoring end, they spend less time thinking about how they're showing up in places. They spend more time thinking about what they want to do. They spend less time thinking about social cues. They spend less time thinking about the needs of the situation. They spend less time thinking about meeting the needs of the situation. They have the opposite relationship. So they tend to have less successful professional relationships. So I'm a low self-monitor. I spend a lot of time thinking about myself, my self-concept, what I want, right? That's that introversion piece. I don't spend as much time thinking about how my self-concept and my behavior and my self-presentation vibes with the norms and expectations of the situation. It makes me tricky professionally. I would be a lot further along in my career and I'd probably be making a lot more money if I were a higher self-monitor. But I have great interpersonal relationships because I know who I am and I show up that way. And if people don't like it, kick rocks. You know what I mean? Because then I don't spend time around people trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. Now that doesn't mean that you don't adapt, and that doesn't mean that you don't think about other people's needs and wants. It just means that you're not spending time trying to mold your internal self-concepts to fit so that you're never out of place. Like you're okay being out of place. I'm okay being out of place. I'm happy being out of place. And if I'm so out of place that it's making my students uncomfortable or it's, screwing up the family reunion, then yes, obviously I adapt my behavior a little bit. There's no such thing as just like showing up as who you are, fuck you if you don't like it, I'm out of here. Nobody can survive that way. Even I can't survive that way, right? We all have to adapt and be interpersonally associative and reciprocal in our relationships and interdependent. We all have to do that stuff, right, to fundamentally get along. The question just is, do you take it to the extreme, or do you take it like higher than average, or are you more of like a no, I'm just going to show up the way that I think I should because I want to play it safe? So again, there's just so many ways to label yourself. If you don't like thinking about yourself as a self-monitor, don't use that label. But if labeling yourself as a high self-monitor or a low self-monitor helps make sense of how you behave and it gives you something to work toward and a way to think about how you communicate, great, keep it. If you like conscientiousness, keep it. If you hate neuroticism, dump it. I mean, there are going to be so many concepts in this class that you can apply to yourself. You can use the ones that you like and discard the ones that you don't. Part of the reason we write the essays the way that we do is because I like you to pick up the parts of the class that really relate well to you and help you understand yourself better and how you communicate with people. But I don't want you to write an essay on a bunch of stuff that you don't believe in. So you take the quiz, you show me that you understand the difference between neuroticism or conscientiousness and high self-monitoring. Like, what's low conscientiousness versus high self-monitoring? I mean, could you identify those, right? And that's where the practice quizzes come in hand. But then for the stuff that doesn't work for you, like, great, you tried it out, you looked at some examples, maybe you took a self-assessment on it, you listened to me talk about it a bit, but you're like, this label just doesn't fit me. And trust me, there's lots more stuff that I can include in this curriculum that I just was like, I've never found this helpful, like Johari's window. Go look at Johari's window. People teach that all the time in this class. I've never found it helpful. I just don't, on a regular day-to-day basis, I don't use Johari's window to understand myself or my students or my relationships or my family. So I dumped it. So everything I've kept here are things that I've really found to be helpful in thinking about how I do what I do and why I do it, and also to push me in a direction of like doing things better so I can show up better in my life. So that is everything for the self unit, self and perception. And next we're going to talk about self-talk. So all of this stuff was about like labels you might give yourself for how you behave and what you think. And next, we're actually going to look at specific practices of self-talk that uphold those labels and how you can use self-talk as a place to change how you're talking to yourself, how you're explaining things to yourself, how you're making sense of things. So that if you want to change your self-concept, or you want to change your big 5 personality traits, or you want to start to adopt different kinds of behavior or slide yourself from low to high self-monitoring in different situations, you can use your self-talk as a lever to do that. So I will see you in the second set of videos. I am so tired right now, so please thank you for bearing with me for what I think will be almost like 2 hours of video footage, and we'll see how you like it, because this is the first time I've ever done it. So I will talk to you soon.